Marr. He's present. Tom Norton.
Present.
Present. Paula Curran.
Present.
Lisa Hewitt.
Present.
Susan Bryant.
Present.
Barbara Canny.
Present.
John Keneally. Not yet. Jeff Hartwell. Not yet. Lori Gibbons.
I'm here.
Thank you, Lori. Okay. The meeting is duly noticed and authorized, and
Oh, one
Wanna
second.
start?
Yeah,
the first item on the agenda.
Tim, can I interrupt you for a second? I just got a text from Sean saying that he needs the Zoom info. Lauren, can you send that to Sean? That's great. Thank you.
Yes.
You gotta love it.
I should check in with all the children earlier.
Okay,
And Jack
All right.
Buckley just
Well-
wrote to Lauren.
that's fine. I think we can, Sean will join us, and I think that we can get started here. The first item on the agenda is the proposal to form a working group from the Cohasset Harbor Committee. And I would like to make a motion that the proposal that I sent out to all of you, I assume you all have it. If anybody does not have it, let me know and I can make sure we can send it again. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the proposed working group along the structure that was submitted. Do I hear a second?
Yes, I second it.
Thank you. Okay.
Can we have I'm sorry. Is there any way we could have a quick discussion just to clarify it before we?
We will have a discussion. Now that we've got a motion and a second, we now have a discussion.
Okay, so it's not approved yet. We're just going to
No, it's
discuss.
not a
No.
vote.
Okay,
We have to
sorry.
vote
Okay.
to approve. We're just,
Not a vote.
bear with me here. I want to make sure we've got a second. We got the motion, we got a second. I want to make sure we do this correctly. Okay, now we can have a discussion. Does anybody like to comment? I can tell you, first of all, that that this is the third iteration of a subcommittee, working group, whatever, to start the implementation of the harbor plan. And I've discussed this structure with many people, including some of the select board, planning board, town manager, various other people. And this is the structure that seems to work the best. And it is one that that I think can work very well. But I'd love to hear from the rest of you. Does anybody have any comments, any thoughts?
Well, Matt Marr here.
Yeah.
The working group is just a modified version of the Harbor Committee, am I right?
Tim, this is really, we can't do it this way.
I know, Matt, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. The people on the,
Can you hear me now?
I can
You
hear
might have a
They
chance
can't.
if you
They
put
can't. Susan
your
Bryant
phone
can't
with a
hear you,
speaker right
so
next to your
I'll try
microphone,
to-
Tim,
I'll
but
try to,
otherwise.
Matt
no,
will ask me a
not.
question, Susan, and I will try to repeat it. Matt's question was, is this just a iteration of the Harbor Committee? And the answer is no. It is a small working group of 5 members made up of members of the Harbor Committee to review, discuss, and prioritize the 52 suggestions in the Harbor Plan for presentation and approval by the Harbor Committee. The process would be the working group would meet until they are ready to present to the Harbor Committee, the full Harbor Committee. They would also take input from not only other members of the Harbor Committee, but members of the community as they did their research and prioritization. But my guess is they would probably meet at least once a week, hopefully, until this was complete. And I would hope that it would be complete by the end of this calendar year. You okay with that, Matt? Okay, Matt's okay with that.
Barb, did you want to talk or I don't want to talk over you.
No,
You
go
just
ahead.
have your mouth open. Do you want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. So, first of all, I know that we have been delinquent and going over all these documents, so, and I personally have, so I apologize, but I really spent a long time because it's so much here, which is fantastic. My only question is, could we modify this a little bit in that, because you've done a really good job, or this document has done a really good job of kind of grouping together the, 5 to 9 areas that are kind of globally important, and kind of breaking down the harbor plan that we have. Would it be possible so we could have as many people on the harbor committee who wants to be part of this working group? If there's any way we could, as a group, hopefully tonight, kind of come up with, and I kind of made a quick sketch of the breaking it down to very basic categories. And then we could say, like, for example, fishing fleet. I think we've all agreed that's a very important element and piece of the pie to our harbor, and we want to continue a very vibrant fishing fleet. And how do we continue to do that? Would there be any way, Tim, where we could do, for example, 4 or 5 working groups so that we have a specialty within that category of that working group, so that we can really, that working group can dive into that category super in depth, because we have so much here. And then that way more people can also be part of the working groups. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Is that-
I
what do you
hear
think
you,
of
and I thank you for that, Paula. The idea is there is so much there that if we had all 10 of us working on this together, we would, in my opinion, would not make much progress. The concept of this that you're talking about is exactly what the working group would do, is to prioritize it into categories that where we can set priorities. And then there would be working groups similar to the one that already exists for governance, as an example, to attack each of those priorities in depth and to come up with recommendations for moving forward. That's really the concept. The first concept is to get all those 52 into the appropriate categories, setting priorities, recommending them to the Greater Harbor Committee. The idea to have 5 and not 10 is that it's a much more nimble number. It's easier to get a quorum. It's easier to set a timetable. It's easier to get meetings scheduled around everybody else's busy schedule. So that's the idea. 5 is, I think, ideal. That's
No, and I agree, but I think or maybe I'm misrepresenting myself. What I was thinking, like, for example, I would love to be part of dredging, and so if maybe I don't pay it, like ecosystem, environmental issues, not in my wheelhouse, totally in Susan's wheelhouse, although maybe she wants to do something that, is not her background or whatever. If each of us kind of made a commitment to focus on something specific and then report back to, like little mini groups, and then report back to the committee, I think more everybody would be able to have a hand in this, is what I'm saying.
Everybody does have a hand in it. What you're asking is for step 2 to come before step 1, in my opinion. And that is finding people on the committee to take up specific issues within the 52 before we have even set the priority. So what I'm trying to do here, Paula, is to structure the priorities first, then to assign people that have an interest in those priorities, specific ones, whether it's environmental, whether it's dredging, whether it's the fishing fleet, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's the breakwater, whatever it may be, to then form a working group to focus on that. That's what we're trying to do here.
I think I think what Paul is trying to say, maybe I'm reading into it, that not what Paul's trying. What I'd like to say is that I think setting the priorities is a huge thing, and I think that I appreciate the nimbleness of a smaller group of people, but I do think that there's all the people here on this screen have all worked somewhat toward this goal. And I don't know if with this such a big document, having read every word of it and having spent a lot of time, mending and putting together amendments and sending them and working with you, Tim, and all the other members. So I'm, pretty aware of what's in there. It's huge. And so why not have 2 or 3 subgroups that look through these 50 odd, 70 odd pieces and then come back as a group and set their priorities, as opposed to just one subsection. And my understanding is that, you've already put forward a slate of people who you think should be doing it. This would give an opportunity and an engagement of all the members here to work on it.
I'll tell you what, why don't we have another working group? We'll start another working group that is of all the people that are not on the working group that I proposed, and they can do the same thing. I'd be happy, and maybe we get together from time to time and see where we all are. That'd be fine with me. I mean, there's no limit to the number of working groups we can have, and I certainly am not opposed to having more than one. Lauren, how many working groups can you handle?
Tim, I don't think I really deserve to, for my comments to be.
Serious, Lisa, I'm serious. We can have more than one working group. I'm not trying to put you down. I'm just saying we can have more than one working group. Yes, Susan.
I think that that, as you said, that we all have actually read the document so much in depth, and throughout the whole thing, I think we have had it in mind that, to toss out that amount of homework that we've done on the topic and leave it to somebody else seems kind of a waste. Personally, of me, I would not want to toss out all the work that I've done and say, oh yeah, you guys can decide priorities now. I think that the setting of priorities is perhaps our most important task of the Harbor Committee as a whole. I think it is the one thing that we really do need everybody's input on, and the input of all these people who have been selected to contribute in meaningful ways and represent organizations and individuals and businesses in the town. It is the thing that's going to make the difference, and it requires a holistic view of things, and it doesn't require a small minority of groups going at it. A priority list has to be big picture, everybody involved, and some of the priorities are purely chronological, and some of them are you have to do this first, and some of them have to do with the need and the interests of the town, and we all as a committee, as a full committee, do represent those interests of the town. And so I think I'd be okay to have smaller working committees after the priorities are set, and then people go into depth and they figure out, okay, if we're going to talk cranes, do you really want me talking about what the fishermen need? I don't think so. I think you want the fishermen figuring that out. Do you really want at that point, people dig in and share their expertise and maybe have working groups that have additional experts in them. But I think to prioritize what the harbor plan, whatever 200 pages of it was, is a job for all of us to do, as we have been.
Thank you, Susan. No one under this structure, no one would be denied access to any meeting or any conversation that would be had. Absolutely not. So
Tim, can I speak?
Welcome. Yes, Matt.
We've already identified all the issues that confront us down in the harbor. What about if we have working groups working on individual projects, progressing them forward on their own? People, Susan's interested in what she's interested in. Lisa, you're interested in what you're interested in. I'm interested in what I'm interested in. We form those working groups, moving those issues forward. Then we could prioritize afterwards. Whoever's gaining on their workload should be able to progress their agenda ahead of the other group that hasn't been doing their workload.
So how many?
To have more meetings, it seems to me that we're just replicating what we've been doing for the last 3 years. We're just going into subgroups.
How many working groups would you propose?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Came up with 5.
You could,
Five.
ask each individual which interests them, and then we could figure that part out. Or uh, to go through this again without getting anything done is really, I have a short attention span. And I'd really like to get something done here without going through, motions about
Okay,
procedure and that sort of thing. But
all right.
I know we have to. I know that's part of the deal.
Barbara?
Is there any way we could do something like that? Does anybody understand what I'm talking about?
Lauren, do you have a comment?
Yes, just two comments. One, first, I just want to remind everybody that when we talk about prioritizing and things, that in the implementation chapter for the harbor plan, there's a list of recommendations and next steps and strategies, different grant opportunities, things of that nature. I think the intent here is just to prioritize because there's only so much bandwidth in town, and this needs to be done in coordination with town staff and elected officials and things like that. So the intent here is, as I'm sure you're all aware, is to sort of prioritize what can be done in a realistic timeline of things. And then with that said, I just wanted to state again, the implementation chapter, we don't want to lose sight that there's already recommendations and things in that document that's been worked on. And also just in terms of bandwidth, particularly in this virtual meeting environment, all of these working groups are subject to open meeting law. They all need to be posted with minutes and agendas and things like that. And in virtual, you need a town staff member to hold the meeting. So just in terms of, I just want to remind everybody, we have small staff. I already have I service a lot of committees and boards. I can't reasonably split between 5 working groups that are meeting on a regular basis. So I'm just gonna, I just want to be realistic about bandwidth here. I'm not saying that I'm not willing to work with you all and this, I'm happy to continue this, but we can't have, divide amongst everybody. And the intent is here to try to make a realistic expectation of work plan moving forward.
Barbara?
Organized.
Barbara Canny, you've had your hand up.
Would it be difficult, just as our group here, if we have an hour next time, and you've got your 9 points here, and they're all different. They don't really intertwine. We could start with the 9, figure out if 2 should be combined into one specific thing. And then why couldn't we sit down and just read each one of the 57 and say, okay, this goes to here, this goes to here, this goes to here, and then people take that that subject, like the fishing fleet, go through the 57, pick out the things that all about the fishing fleet on here, and then say Matt takes care of that.
I'm happy to have you do that, Barbara. Would you take that on? And maybe that's the way to get it started.
I can help you with that. I already kind of did that when I was reading it.
Okay, there's another volunteer. We've got a working group going.
So the thing is, it has to be all of us. So if we want everybody to include, it has to be one of these meetings with a.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's a matter of,
But if you're talking, it's easier than say Susan thinks it goes to A and I think it goes to C. When we're all together, we can discuss it and say, okay, let's give it to C. Does that make sense? And then each one can branch off. That seems to me that you need to get to that point, first of all.
Can I
Lauren,
restructure? May I suggest a restructuring of the motion for discussion? It was presently presented as a group of 5 people who will be looking at the entire document to come up with priorities. I think even if we did it into 2 or 3 groups, that would take certain sections and prioritize them with that group, and then reconvene with this larger group to come up with our most recent priorities we want to look at. It's just too big to think that, frankly, 5 people would be prioritizing, even if they did come back. I mean, I can benefit from hearing people's input and why they prioritize it. And I also talk to people in town hall about, structure and how to go forward and this and that. And they said, it's up to this committee to figure out how they want to go forward. And it seems like there's a sentiment to have more involvement in this prioritization process.
well, first of all, I think you misspoke a little bit, Lisa. It is not the whole document we're talking about prioritizing. It is the recommendations, the proposals that are in the implementation phase of that document. Now, if if you would like, I'd be delighted to have you take on the chair of a group to put this together, if you'd like to do it. We need to move it forward. I'm with Matt 100%. We've been at this now for 3.5 years. It's time to move forward. If you've got a better way to do it, please do. Step forward. I'm happy to do it. I do not feel that I own this whole thing. So all I'm trying to do is to get it to move forward. And I personally think that a committee of 10 cannot make progress on this particular issue. So therefore, I will happily step aside and let you go to it, and I'll be able to comment as we move forward, as you go forward. Yes, Matt.
Tim, and the rest of the people here. Lauren, I'm talking to Lauren, she has the document maybe in front of her, but in the document, it spells out the implementation process. Am I correct when you said that? To you, Lauren?
Yes. Yes, the implementation chapter speaks to responsibilities and next steps, recommendations.
Okay, then maybe should we be following those steps that are in the document
Well,
in regards to implementation? That's just my question. And the other thing is, you can only do one. You can't do all these projects at the same time. Obviously, it's going to take years to get them done. Why don't we pick a project to do? Just start, just to get some progress.
that's the idea.
in the works.
That's the idea of prioritization.
Right,
Well,
right,
but we could argue,
right.
How do we pick what to do
my
first?
my priority is the Government Island Pier. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Well, that's good, except that the Government Island Pier might be a Seaport Economic Development Council grant. And if we're applying for one Seaport Economic Development Council grant, we want to maximize what we can do with that and figure out, well, maybe we can stuff dinghy dock in there too under, however we word it. But
Absolutely.
those grant applications are big money to receive. They're really worth pursuing, and they're really worth pursuing in a smart way in conjunction with other needs in town. So it would be really horrible if we advocated hard for one priority that we felt was low-hanging fruit and we could accomplish, and that was exciting and great for us because it made us feel like we'd accomplished something. And in the meantime, we stiffed the harbor master, or stiffed the something that's a structural thing that's absolutely essential. So I think that what I was saying about all these priorities, the task of actually prioritizing is something that is a big picture job, so that we don't miss something like that. Like, yes, this is a good project to go through with, but let's also make sure that when we do this, we haven't, stuffed ourselves on some other part that is also a priority in a different way.
Can we reapply for money through the Sea Grant program
You
down the line?
you can, but you have to wait till the next year. So that's why I'm saying that it's a very strategic thing. And I don't certainly proclaim to be an expert on it, but it's something that we definitely want to check with Lauren and the town manager about.
Can I say something? It's Tom Norton.
Yes, Sean?
Tom. It's Tom Norton.
Tom. Sure, Tom.
So, I understand and respect everything everybody's saying. I think we might be overthinking it somewhat. And again, coming from a business background, I'm looking at it from a business perspective, not profit and loss, but how do you accomplish things in business? And one of the things I learned early on was breaking tasks like this down that have multiple layers and multiple complexities to try to pick it in groups of 3. I don't know why, but it typically works pretty well. So maybe we could take, instead of spending an inordinate amount of time trying to make it perfect and make sure we cover all the grants and make sure we don't miss anything, we as a group decide, let's pick 3 things that we're going to work on. Whatever those are, we try to come up with those, and we have a hard stop deadline to pick those 3 things. And then we move forward, and we may miss a dinghy dock. We may miss some things, but at least we've started the ball rolling and we've started to accomplish something. Because I think the challenge we're all going to have is that it is such a huge project that we got to start somewhere. And you know what? Those first 2 or 3 things we're starting with, they may not even be that good. And we may miss some things, but at the end of the day, at least we've started. And as we accomplish each task, I think we're going to learn from that task, and then the next one gets better. But I think we have to start somewhere, and I would, my recommendation instead of one, we pick 3 things out of here. And maybe the next meeting is, as Barbara said, we go through it. Barbara and Paula, you've already kind of categorized it. We've got some overall categories you guys have already done, and let's try to pick 3 of those and we go.
So I have a question about that. Because I think about the ways things are interconnected. That's where I come from. So if we were to take the dredging as an example, would you see that dredging would also include the siltation of the cove and the other possibilities that might require additional dredging if we were to implement them? Because like there's the regular dredging maintenance that we do has been, done. We basically know how to do it. We pretty much know how often it has to be done to dredge the channel. But if we wanted to do boat slips somewhere, or if we wanted to work on the siltation of the cove, and maybe even if we're dealing with seawalls, then the dredging might play a part in that. So would you feel, Tom, that would all be one interrelated topic under dredging? Would that work for you?
I mean, off the top of my head, it probably would. And I hate to use a euphemism though, but dredging sounds so big and onerous. I'm more trying to pick 3 low-hanging fruits, for lack of a better term. 3 things
has
that
to happen. That's why.
Yeah, and whenever you use the word dredge, that's years-long project and will require. Could we pick 3 things that we can get done pretty quickly, and we get a sense of confidence as a group that, boy, we can get something done, and then we start to tackle some of that bigger stuff. I think what you're saying has validity, but I think it would be again, for if we're going to pick 3 things, that would probably be not one of the first 3 things I would pick. But open to the group for your feedback.
Yeah, I think we're getting into granular nature of the actual deliberation on the prioritization, as opposed to, the thing that's on the table. And unfortunately, I think we only have like 12 more minutes to decide, because of the only hour long, is, what is the structure going to be? And it seems like there are different areas. I don't know if we've heard from everybody.
Lauren.
Quick question.
Yes.
What if we as a group, and we all represent different constituents within the harbor, and we go through the 57 different objects that are, priorities within the harbor, and we go back and talk to, people that we work with, and then we come back as a harbor committee together and say, these are the priorities for our groups. And then we mishmash those into a list that is, in the perfect world, these are the most important things that we need to get done. And to just work, we kind of peck away at them as they come forward. So if there's a great thing, we can pick number 5 before number 1, because there's money available for that. But if we can all agree on what are the priorities of the harbor, then we have that list, and then we can start working on that slowly but surely, just like Tom said, and pecking away at what we can peck away with.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren,
Yes, Lauren.
Lauren.
Thank you. I also just wanted to point out that in the implementation chapter, there is a section that couples needs and dependencies. So, so that recommended actions and things that you can couple together. So there is some of this outlined already, to speak to sort of Susan's point about, dredging. What, if you're looking for resources and funding to do that, what can you tie together with that? So that's also discussed in implementation chapter here as well.
And then Lauren, can you tell us what you would recommend? I mean, how do you find that people, really this has been done before, an organization comes up with a plan and then they have to prioritize the action, and there's a lot of people who have put heart and soul in. What is a structure that you think works? Or are you allowed to provide us that information, advice?
Right, I can give you, I've spoken to Tim about this leading into this, and while the working group concept is sort of, it's being put to use for master plan implementation right now, focusing on different projects, and I see how that works. I think that the larger committee here needs to have, and I would recommend maybe what we do is have a sort of session dedicated to like a visioning session, and pick out the top 3 like was just stated, and then we go from there. Pick out what the top 3 projects that we'll do for the next year, and then from there you can break into smaller people who do their homework and deliverables on those 3. But until we get to that point, it's sort of a chicken before the egg scenario.
So
complicated.
The part that gets confusing to me is that I feel like there's tasks that need to be done that we have insight that we could contribute, but then we don't really have a time to discuss it, deliberate, or even have a shared document that we can write comments on. Like normally my way of working is I have a Google Doc and, you know, we share comments back and forth on it as we develop it. And it's a way of deliberating. So I don't know, I mean, maybe part of the problem is that the open meeting laws haven't kept pace with the fact that there's Google Docs and there's Zoom meetings now. But what is the legal and smart way to actually get democracy input from everybody who's dedicated to this task without breaking the rules and making it non-transparent or run by a few people?
Right. I think that's a great point. And one of the catches of open meeting law is that you can't have sort of collaborative workspace environment that takes place outside of open meeting. What I would suggest is that in order to move forward in a timely fashion, if we could set a standing regular harbor committee meeting that met at a certain date and time, whether it's the third X day of whatever, at what time, and just have a standing, however long you want to dedicate to implementation. I think you need one session focused solely on really drilling down in the implementation chapter and sort of setting some priorities. And then if you have a standing committee meeting where you all get together and there's a standing agenda item that's, let's talk about implementation, you can have your, whatever other business you want to talk about. And then, once you talk about that for 30 minutes, then we're going to talk about implementation until we close. That would be my suggestion, is to sort of set this up so that it's a standing item.
So if I want to know, it sounds like Paula had some ideas of boiling things down into certain categories, and Barbara may have too, and Matt may have too. So if I wanted to know what they were thinking, what's the way for me to do it? Do I just wait for the meeting?
So what I would suggest is you can use me as a staff member as a central repository of information, because I'm not the open meeting law. You can all communicate and give me your ideas and I can be the repository. You just can't be having a chain of conversation between each other or, meeting and talking amongst yourselves. But that way, if there's documents that you want to share in advance of the meeting, you can give it to me and I can distribute to the group. That way, you all know each other's thoughts before the group, so you don't have to wait until that time to have that discussion. That would be perhaps helpful.
Yeah.
Is there any way for us to, along those lines, and use you, Lauren, to break down into 2 or 3 smaller groups? So let's just say Susan, Lisa, and Tim are going to be a little group where they themselves go off, prioritize what they think, share the information with you, almost like a little subgroup. And then when we get together with our standing regular committee time, those 3 can say, these are the documents that we've kind of put together, that these are our priorities through you, so that it's still open and fair. And then Matt and Barb and Lori get together and say, this is kind of what we're thinking, so that, what I'm saying? So there's a productive conversation, although it's not all 10 of us talking, but at least if we can do small conversations through you and prioritizing, then those 2 or 3 little groups can then kind of present to the major group. And this next time we could come up and be like, okay, we've all had a conversation, because 10 of us hashing out 52 things is going to take us days. So is there any way to be efficient that way, so that we can have conversations and then come back to the next big meeting, be like, okay, this is, to Tom's point, these are the things that we're just going to sink our teeth into and we're going for it. Is that possible?
Right. I would say yes. It gets into a little bit of a gray area when you have multiple members of the committee. You can't have a quorum without it, so I think I just need to do some sort of thinking and logistic working about how that would work. Again, because you don't want to have change. I'm sorry.
Laura, I wonder if with the technology, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm getting nervous about it, but the technology of Zoom, and you do have, breakout sessions capability on a Zoom meeting. So someone wouldn't have to, and I know it's very difficult. And I was teasing Chris Senior about buy another one for God's sake. It's $30 a month. We'll all pitch in. If they had different breakout sessions, then you could convene a meeting. Then certain people would go to the different breakout sessions in the same time slot and then reconvene at the end and come up with, a work product.
Right. And my only question, It's just in terms of I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the workout sessions in Zoom. Is like, could the public then like flit around in between the sessions, or that's my own. I just need to do some more exploring about logistics of that.
I don't know I don't know the answer. I'm just wondering technologically.
Right. I know. And the open meeting law and the barriers of public meetings, they haven't kept pace with what technology allows us to do.
And then maybe even the recordings of the Zoom suffice as a minutes. I mean, there's so many things that we got to catch up, man.
Right.
Well, the other option, I guess, would be that we all go off on our own, come up with our own individual priority list, unfortunately hand it to you for you to kind of collate, and then we'll know kind of, what people feel is most important. I guess we could do it that, like, commit to each other as of a week from today or next Friday or whatever that we feel is a comfortable date. We are willing to submit, a document per person of what we think is important. I guess we could do it that way.
I mean, I think that would be, I'd be happy to do that. And then we can schedule another meeting with everybody, and we'd have enough time I would circulate all of you. We'd have a date that you would give me your comments and your, whatever your thoughts are. I would send it out so you would have time to review it in advance of the meeting, and then we'd regroup.
Yeah. Would you?
What do people think about that?
I think that's a good idea, Paula.
A lot of work for you, Lauren, but
Okay.
sorry.
I
just help you.
What happens to the
We don't go on, Lauren, that we do that homework, and then we come back as a group and meet and say, okay, what are the priorities of
that came up? Right.
and then we can go back and just make a priority list of what everybody thinks is in the best interest of the people that they represent.
Great.
Yeah, because to Susan's point, there's quite a few things that are overlapping. And like you said, Lauren, too, the implementation chapter gives you, number 1, 8, 15, and 35 all are under the same umbrella. So if we use that as a guide, then we can kind of pull together these things. Because this is a fabulous document, this implementation plan. It's just, getting our teeth into it.
But there's just one quick question. What happens to things that are already in process, like the boat ramp? Does that get affected by this, or is that, because that's already going? Or is that over here? You know what I'm saying?
And that's still, the selectmen have already committed to that, and that's going forward.
Okay, so that's not even, okay.
And the underlying factor about all of this is we're not the decision makers on anything. We're just advisors. So, when we come up with our, it still has to go through the machinations of municipal government, as Lauren could tell us more than anything. Funding, timing, everything else. So, but to be true to how much work, people have put into this process, we just need to get going and commit to maybe, every week for the next 4 weeks to have meetings, at some point, to come up with the priorities and then go forward.
But for now, you could break the 57 down into the 9 here and just put the number next to it that it applies to for you. Does that make sense? If you take each one of these 9 steps here, ideas, plans, then take your 57 and then just mark them accordingly. That shouldn't be too hard for Lauren then.
That's not how my breakout happened. Maybe it is possible. It just wasn't the same as mine, but that's okay.
That's okay.
And then Lauren, as far as the quorum, I'm sorry, I'm like in kindergarten with these things. So how many people do we have to have an official meeting? And if people miss the meeting and can listen to it, listen to the Zoom recording afterwards, they could still have input. So to me, that strikes me as the spirit of the law. But what is the actual law?
I don't know. I forget the exact number of committee members, but it's.
You need 6.
Right. So you need 6 for a quorum.
Okay.
So what I would suggest to you all, if this works for everyone, is if you could get me your collective thoughts a week from today, and then we could try to schedule a meeting the following week.
Sure.
That work for folks?
So everything's due to you by
Sure.
the later than the 7th.
Right. Now, let me open my calendar before I make a promise I can't keep.
Oh, can I jump in again? I'm gonna steal Susan Spray's. Just, can you kindergarten this for me? What are we doing exactly? Because I didn't really follow that whole thing, sorry.
So I think you're directing that at me. You're right.
I am.
Okay, I wanted to make sure before I spoke. What I would suggest is for whatever prioritization items, recommendations that are in the implementation plan that you feel most strongly about that you'd like to tackle first. Everybody can have their collective thoughts, comments, however you want to do it. If you could send it to me by the 7th, I will condense that in whatever manner I see fit once I get your responses, and I'll get it to you by the end of the week. I have a lot of meetings next week, so I'll get it to you by Friday so you can look at it over the weekend. And then we will plan to reconvene the following week and talk about what, based on what came out of that, what we do next.
Okay, again, I apologize, but so you're gonna forward the implementation plan to us, and then we're gonna prioritize it by order of what we think should be done? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
We have it already. I think we're all going to work off of this document that Tim has sent, and Tim did a great job of pulling it all together for us. So I think that's kind of the foundation. Obviously, we can pull the manual out because then it directs you on under a certain, fishing fleet. These are the issues that come under that heading. But I think we're going to use, does that make sense, guys? That we're going to use the implementation document that Tim has sent out as our kind of our guide.
It's a great document.
Right. I would just also, the implementation plan is at the end of the harbor plan. So you already have a copy of it.
Yeah. So we should go back and forth between the two. But what Tim has done an amazing job of taking, 200 pages down to 5.
Right.
So this is a great way to start.
Okay, sorry, one more time. So I'm gonna take, of these 52 items, I'm gonna put them in order of what I think their priority should be? Or am I gonna pick the top 10 or what? I'm sorry, what do I do with the 52?
I got you. The way I understand it is you take number 1, says support Cohasset commercial fishing fleet. Then this is the way I don't know, then I would just go through each one and say which one applies to number 1. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, but then also kind of go back and, like, for example, I'm from the yacht club. So I have already talked to the flag officers with this document to say, obviously we're looking holistically at the harbor, but for the yacht club specifically, what do you guys feel is most important? And, that's kind of a little bit the way I'm dredging. I'm dredging. I keep saying
Again.
I'm really into dredging, huh? Good Lord. That'll probably be when I go through my things, whatever the yacht club is feeling most important, probably on the top of my list, or something personally that I think is important, or something that's really gleaming in the master harbor plan.
And then I think what I can contribute to it is slightly different from that, is the things that go together as far as regions of influence. That's so that as the ecologist in me, that's kind of how I think. So I would glom things that way. So I'll do some glomming, and it might be complementary or it might be, disagree, but I'll contribute that, and we'll see where that goes from there.
Yeah. But we're looking for priorities.
Right.
Whole mass, we're just trying to identify, if we were given money tomorrow, what would be our priority?
Right. And as Tom says, don't pick 52 things.
Right.
Pull it down to 3 to 5 or something like that. And then within those 3 to 5, global categories, what are the things that we could try and go and implement based on the implementation chapter? Does that make sense? Heavy sigh from someone.
Yep.
That was Barb. Okay, so what am I? I'm the person who's the whole community. How do I get the Community fees.
Well, I think we all are. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all thinking of the whole community. So I think we only have a couple more minutes, so I think the plan has been laid out pretty well.
But you know, that's a question. Could you do that? Could you write on Facebook, Cohasset 143? What do you think about our harbor and what would you like to see happen?
Yeah, that's worked pretty well for the master plan. And I mean, I feel like we have, I mean,
But
it's
isn't that what we
limited to just your
did?
Facebook audience, but it does get, you do get consensus from the citizens. We get,
I know, but we already did that. We
We
did
did?
that.
Okay.
We had open houses, we had, I mean, that's how we got, I mean, don't you think that's accurate, Lawrence? That's how we got to this harbor, you know, identification. We had houses, we had
Good.
people, you know, you know, I'm afraid we're getting too granular here. I think of the pages that are put forward, what are the priorities?
Okay,
All the members of this committee that we're meeting right now, all have their own priorities. And they have their own reasons for being here. And we're all gonna come up with the priorities that we already have in our heads. And each one of us has a different priority. So we're rehashing the same things over and over. And so it's gonna come down to who has the most influence in this committee to determine what's gonna get done. And because each one of us has their own separate priorities. Lisa's not going to agree with Paula, and Paula's not going to agree with Susan, and Barbara's not going to agree with Tim or me or the harbor master.
Surprisingly enough, Matt, I put fishing fleet the most important on my list.
Great, I'm working with you, Paula.
So, you know, I think we kind of look towards, we have the eyes and the ears of whatever organization we represent, but I think we each are glued enough to realize we're doing for what is best for the harbor and the town.
yeah.
So, like I said,
We have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. I wish we could start.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Matt, I think you'll be surprised how many similar priorities people have.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to be very, very similar because I think we're very aware of what needs to be done and hopefully we can get it done.
And then Lauren, do you want it as a document with comments or do you want it as a fresh document? Do you care? Anything?
Sorry, whatever you want to submit to me, whatever format makes, if it's an email, if it's a document, and I can compile, you know, whatever works easiest for you folks.
Okay.
So
Thank you for doing that.
my pleasure. I'm here to help facilitate.
I
you
have
so
just
much,
one other
Laura.
question. Do we have anything
Thank
else?
you so much.
That's it. I will say, I believe we're getting kicked off because there's another committee meeting starting at 5. I don't know which one.
I have a short question.
Yeah.
If we don't have a quorum at one of these meetings, can we still get some work done but not make any decisions? So can we still like attack a document and then present it at the next time we do have a quorum in order to decide? Is that valid?
You cannot deliberate.
Right. You can't deliberate.
Yeah. Susan, you may really want to go on the Attorney General's website. They have a really good consumer's guide to the open meeting law that answers a lot of these questions.
So tricky, isn't it?
And I can send it to you.
Are these subgroups of 3, are they gonna be violating the open meeting law?
It's working groups are very much a gray area, as I've said to
Well,
Tim.
it's just a semantics, isn't it? Isn't a working group, instead of being a committee, it's a working group, and that gets you around the open meeting rule? I'm not sure. Can 3 people meet and deliberate?
I think if they post it, and you can.
Right.
No, they can't if they are part of another committee, if their meeting is part of another committee, unless they're a specific committee that is authorized, and then they have a quorum. If you have a committee of 3, a quorum is 2.
oh,
You can't just have ad hoc committees meeting that are part of a subgroup of a committee. 3 of us cannot meet to discuss any of this stuff. So anyway, well, thank you very much all. I will share with you that I'm skeptical about how this is going, but I'm happy to play along. Let's see where it goes. We've been trying to get this going now for 3 years, and God bless you all for putting your time in. And let's see where we go. Thank you, Lauren, for doing it. And I'll be very interested to see what we got.
Thank you for all that you've done too. I know this was, getting this together is a deal as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Laura,
care.
thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, everybody.